My beloved child, pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not meant to pass by you unnoticed. Something happened last night, something so unexpected and emotionally powerful that your soulmate has been carrying the weight of it from the moment the darkness faded into morning. They have tried to continue with their day. They have tried to speak normally, to appear calm, to convince themselves that they can wait a little longer before telling you. But deep inside, their heart keeps repeating your name. There is a truth pressing against their silence, and every hour they keep it hidden makes that truth feel heavier. Do not turn away now, because the first thing they need to tell you is not what you think. It is deeper than an apology, more meaningful than a confession, and far more personal than anything they have ever admitted before. Last night began quietly. Nothing about the evening appeared unusual. The same familiar surroundings were there, the same ordinary sounds, the same thoughts they had been trying to control for days. Yet beneath that calm surface, something had already begun shifting. Your soulmate had been thinking about you more intensely than usual, though they did not understand why. Memories appeared without warning. A sentence you once spoke returned to them with new meaning. A look you once gave them replayed in their mind with such clarity that it felt as though you were standing beside them. They tried to distract themselves, but every distraction led back to you. It was as though an invisible hand was turning every road in their mind toward the same destination. Stay with this message, because what happened next changed the way they see your entire connection. There was a moment last night when your soulmate found themselves completely alone with their thoughts. No voices around them. No conversation to hide inside. No task demanding their attention. Only silence. And in that silence, something they had avoided for a long time finally rose to the surface. They realized they had been fighting an emotion that was never meant to be defeated. They had called it confusion. They had called it bad timing. They had even tried to convince themselves it was nothing more than attachment. But last night, every excuse they had carefully built began to collapse. They saw, perhaps for the first time, how deeply your presence had entered their life. They noticed how many decisions had secretly been influenced by thoughts of you. They remembered the moments when they wanted to reach out but stopped themselves. They remembered the messages they typed and erased. They remembered the times they acted distant while privately hoping you would somehow understand what they could not say. And then a painful realization struck them. While they were waiting for the perfect moment, they might have made you believe that you did not matter. That realization shook them. They sat there wondering whether their silence had pushed you too far away. They began asking questions they had avoided before. What if you had finally decided to stop waiting? What if your heart had grown tired of mixed signals? What if someone else had noticed the value they were too afraid to openly cherish? These thoughts did not come as punishment. They came as clarity. Heaven was not trying to frighten them. Heaven was showing them the cost of continuing to hide. And then something happened that made the entire night feel different. Your soulmate heard words about love, commitment, and missed chances. It may have come through a conversation nearby, a message, a memory, a dream, or an unexpected moment that seemed ordinary at first. But the words reached directly into the place where they had buried their feelings for you. They could not ignore the timing. It felt too precise. Too personal. Almost as though the universe had answered a question they had been afraid to ask aloud. The message was simple, but it struck them with extraordinary force. When the heart knows, delay becomes its own decision. That sentence stayed with them. They began replaying every moment between you. Not only the beautiful moments, but the uncertain ones. The misunderstandings. The pauses. The times when both of you seemed to be waiting for the other person to take one brave step. They suddenly recognized that your connection had not been weakened by a lack of feeling. It had been slowed by fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of being too late. Fear of discovering that what they felt was not equally returned. But last night, another truth became stronger than that fear. They realized they would rather face an honest answer than continue living inside unanswered questions. Do not skip this moment, because their desperation to speak with you did not begin only from love. It began from something they discovered about themselves. For a long time, your soulmate believed they needed to have everything figured out before approaching you. They wanted the right words, the right circumstances, the right level of certainty. They wanted to arrive without weakness, without confusion, without anything unfinished. But last night showed them that love does not always wait for a flawless version of a person. Sometimes love asks for truth while the voice is still trembling. Sometimes it asks someone to speak before they know exactly how the conversation will end. Your soulmate saw how perfection had become a hiding place. They understood that they had used timing as protection. They had told themselves, "Not yet," when the real meaning was, "I am afraid." They had said, "I need more clarity," when the truth was, "I already know, but I do not know whether I am brave enough to admit it." Last night removed that illusion. They could no longer pretend they were uncertain about your importance. They may still be uncertain about what happens next, but they are no longer uncertain about what you mean to them. That difference is everything. At some point during the night, their emotions became impossible to contain. They may not have spoken your name aloud, but it filled the room in their mind. They imagined seeing you. They imagined the expression on your face if they finally told you the truth. They wondered whether you would be surprised, whether you would become quiet, whether you would ask why they waited so long. That last question hurt the most. Why did they wait so long? The answer came in layers. They waited because the connection felt too important to risk. They waited because they feared that saying too much might destroy the delicate thread between you. They waited because they had been disappointed before and did not want to experience that pain again. They waited because they sensed something real, and real things can feel frightening when someone is used to protecting their heart. But beneath every reason was one deeper truth. They did not fully believe they were ready to receive the kind of love they saw in you. Last night, that belief began to change. They remembered the way you made them feel seen without forcing them to explain everything. They remembered how your energy seemed to quiet a restlessness inside them. They remembered that even during distance, your presence remained emotionally close. And for the first time, instead of asking whether they were ready for you, they asked a different question. What if you were part of what would help them become ready? This thought opened something in them. They stopped seeing your connection as a test they needed to pass perfectly. They began seeing it as a path that could only be understood by walking it honestly. They realized that waiting until every fear disappeared might mean waiting forever. Courage was not going to arrive before the conversation. Courage would be created by having it. This is why they are desperate to tell you what happened. Not because one dramatic event suddenly changed everything, but because one night of truth revealed what had been changing quietly for a long time. Yet there is more. As the night continued, your soulmate became aware of another presence in their thoughts. Not another romantic person, but the influence of someone whose words had shaped their hesitation. This could be a friend, a relative, someone from their past, or even the echo of an old experience. At some point, they had absorbed the belief that love should always feel easy, obvious, and safe. If it felt intense, they were told to be cautious. If it required vulnerability, they were told to protect themselves. If someone mattered too much, they were told that this gave the other person too much power. Your soulmate had carried those warnings longer than they realized. But last night, they saw the difference between wisdom and fear. Wisdom protects the heart without closing it. Fear locks the door and calls the loneliness safety. Your soulmate recognized that some of the advice they had followed was not helping them choose peace. It was helping them avoid emotional risk at any cost. And the cost had become you. That realization was almost unbearable. They began to understand that losing the possibility of this connection would hurt more than hearing an uncertain answer. The thought of remaining silent while you slowly moved on felt heavier than the thought of finally being honest. Their heart was no longer willing to cooperate with the walls their mind had built. Something in them said, "Speak now." But they did not. Not yet. They reached for their phone. They thought of calling you. They considered writing a message. They imagined beginning with something simple, perhaps asking whether you were awake, perhaps pretending the conversation was casual. But they knew they could not make this casual anymore. Too much had surfaced. A small message could not hold the truth they needed to share. So they stopped. They put the phone down. Then they picked it up again. This happened more than once. Each time, they moved closer to contacting you. Each time, fear interrupted. But with every hesitation, the desire to speak grew stronger. By the final time they looked at your name, they were not asking whether they should tell you. They were only asking how. Do not underestimate the importance of that shift. Their heart has already made the decision their voice is still preparing to express. The reason you may have felt unusual energy around this connection is because something changed during those hours. Perhaps you thought of them unexpectedly. Perhaps you woke without knowing why. Perhaps a memory entered your mind with unusual intensity. Perhaps you felt restless, emotional, hopeful, or strangely calm. In this fictional spiritual story, those feelings represent the invisible bridge between two hearts when one finally stops denying what the other has long sensed. Your soulmate's breakthrough did not remain contained within them. Emotion creates movement. Truth changes energy. The moment they admitted your importance to themselves, the entire connection felt different. But there was still one final layer they had to face. They had to admit what they truly wanted from you. Until last night, they may have allowed themselves to think only in fragments. A conversation. A reunion. A sign. A chance to explain. They avoided imagining anything beyond that because a larger hope would make them more vulnerable. But when the night became quiet enough, the truth arrived without permission. They do not only want a moment with you. They want a place in your life. They want to know the version of you that exists beyond brief conversations and guarded interactions. They want to understand your quiet moods, your dreams, your fears, your routines, your hidden softness. They want to become someone you can speak to without measuring every word. They want to be present not only when life is beautiful, but when it is ordinary, uncertain, and real. This frightened them because it was no longer a passing emotion. It was a vision. And once they saw that vision, they could not return to pretending the connection meant less. Stay until the end, because the vision they saw carried one detail that made them emotional. They imagined you smiling after finally hearing the truth. Not because everything had instantly become perfect. Not because all distance disappeared in one conversation. But because you would finally know that you were never imagining the depth between you. You would finally understand that their silence was not emptiness. It was fear wrapped around feeling. You would finally hear the words they had hidden behind hesitation. In that imagined moment, they saw relief in your face. And then they realized something painful. You deserved that relief much earlier. They began remembering times when you may have questioned yourself because of their inconsistency. Moments when you wondered whether you had misunderstood the connection. Times when you tried to read meaning in their silence because they would not give you clear words. They saw how unfair it had been to expect you to feel secure in something they were too afraid to define. This is where regret entered the night. But it was not empty regret. It was regret carrying a decision. Your soulmate does not only want to say they are sorry. They want to show that something has changed. They know words without action would not be enough. They know you may need time. They know trust cannot be demanded simply because they have finally found courage. And yet they are prepared to begin. This is what makes the message urgent. They are standing at the edge of a choice. Behind them is the familiar world of silence, delay, and imagined conversations. Ahead of them is the unknown world of truth. They cannot see exactly how you will respond. They cannot control what comes after they speak. But for the first time, the unknown feels more honest than the place where they have been hiding. Heaven is whispering to you not to chase, not to force, and not to abandon your peace while waiting for someone else's courage. This message is not asking you to suspend your life. It is reminding you that your worth was never determined by their delay. Their struggle to speak was about their own fear, not a lack within you. You were never too much. You were never too difficult to choose. You were never wrong for sensing something meaningful. And you do not need to reduce your heart to make another person feel safer. Your soulmate's awakening last night was partly the realization that the qualities they found overwhelming in you were the very qualities they needed. Your emotional depth. Your honesty. Your ability to sense what is unspoken. Your refusal to settle for a connection without substance. These things challenged them because they could not remain hidden around you. You saw through the version of them that appeared composed. You sensed the tenderness beneath their distance. And somewhere inside, they knew you saw it. That is why this connection stayed with them. People forget what does not touch them deeply. They do not replay meaningless conversations late at night. They do not type messages to people who never mattered. They do not feel their entire understanding of love shift because of someone they can easily dismiss. Your soulmate could not dismiss you. They tried to place you in a smaller category. They tried to tell themselves you were simply someone special, someone memorable, someone they would eventually stop thinking about. But last night proved that your role in their heart had outgrown every label they used to contain it. And then came the moment that changed everything. Near the deepest part of the night, when exhaustion had lowered their defenses, your soulmate allowed themselves to imagine losing you completely. Not temporary distance. Not a few days of silence. They imagined a life in which you no longer waited, no longer wondered, no longer looked back. They imagined hearing that you had given your heart to someone who recognized its value without hesitation. They imagined watching from a distance while another person received the honesty, loyalty, and emotional depth they had been too afraid to claim. The image struck them harder than expected. They did not feel jealousy first. They felt grief. Grief for the conversations that might never happen. Grief for the moments they had postponed. Grief for the possibility that the story between you could end without ever being fully spoken. That grief revealed the truth more clearly than hope ever had. They love the possibility of you because some part of them already loves the reality of who you are. That is the confession beneath the confession. They may not use those exact words immediately. They may approach carefully. They may begin by explaining the events of last night. They may tell you they could not sleep. They may admit they kept thinking about you. They may speak around the deepest feeling before finally naming it. But listen closely when the conversation comes. Listen not only to the polished sentences, but to the pauses. Listen to what their voice struggles to carry. Listen to the places where fear and truth meet. Your soulmate may appear nervous, but beneath that nervousness is a decision that has been building for longer than either of you realized. They want to stop hiding. They want you to know. And there is one more reason they feel they must speak soon. Last night, they learned something about a choice being made around them. A change may be approaching in their circumstances, responsibilities, plans, or environment. Something that once seemed distant suddenly feels close. It made them realize that time cannot always be assumed. Opportunities shift. People move. Seasons change. A conversation delayed too long can become a conversation that never happens. This possibility gave urgency to everything. They began asking themselves, what do I need this person to know before life changes again? Your name was the answer. They need you to know that you mattered during every silent phase. They need you to know that distance did not erase the feeling. They need you to know that what appeared like indifference was often emotional overwhelm. They need you to know that they have compared every connection to the peace, intensity, or recognition they felt with you. Most of all, they need you to know that last night forced them to choose between protecting their pride and honoring their heart. Their pride is losing. Their heart is finally speaking. But there is still something they have not decided how to tell you. Something happened during those final hours that felt like confirmation. It was not only a memory, and it was not only fear of losing you. There was a specific moment, a sign within the story, that connected directly to a promise, a phrase, or an experience shared between you. When it happened, your soulmate became completely still. They knew it was about you. They knew it could not be ignored. And the meaning behind it was so clear that it brought them to the edge of contacting you immediately. Their hand moved toward the phone again. This time, they opened your conversation. They began typing. The first words appeared on the screen. Then they stopped, because before they could send the message, something else happened. Something that revealed a truth about your future together that they were not prepared to see.